Hello everyone, this is week 2 within the stream of this course, Business Communication 1 or TM315, the first part in the series of this topic. And we'll be looking at communication process, which is the topic. And the secondly, communication process. I am Ahmed Jonathan Agaba, the instructor and lecturer for this course. Now, communication process, as we proceed to help our understanding, would look through the objectives, what are we expected to achieve with and in this course, communication process. What are we expected to achieve? At the end of this course, we should be able to understand the communication process and its key component, identify barriers to effective communication, learn strategies to improve communication skills for better interpersonal interaction, like we find here. So this is just it anyway. So sections, and then we'll look into the introduction. So communication is the process of exchanging information, thoughts, and feelings between individuals. Every communication, now listen to this, every communication has an expectation. Now the expectation of every communication, and particularly within the world of business, as we plan our business, we make projections, of course we have anticipated profit and then net profit, we make all of the plans, the marketing plan, and all of the plans, everything that is required or necessitated to ensure the success of a business, either in the immediate or at the long run, or it could be a short, a term plan or long-term plan. And when we do not factor our communication plan into all of our business plan, it becomes a problem. And so it's one thing communication process as a topic is also to help us look into. But like I did say, every communication has an expectation, and one major expectation of every communication is that that communication becomes effective and successful. Becomes effective and successful in the sense that every communication made or that transpires carries a message or a meaning for which the listeners or hearers or the audience are expected to receive, and receive without ambiguity or without confusion. Same it is within business and whatever transaction that occurs within business or the entrepreneurial world. Every form of communication in terms of correspondences, and some form of communication within business, it is expected that the messages conveyed are received with understanding, and it's in receiving such message with understanding that you can expect feedback, or what we call response or reply. But in communication, of course, business communication in particular, and descriptively at this point, it is called feedback. Okay, so of course it sounds like feed, right? But it's called feedback. So effective communication is essential for building relationships, solving and resolving conflicts, and achieving organizational goals. Now, effective, the emphasis there is effective communication, which is the essence of every communication. Now, every communication that is not effective is described as noise. It is tantamount to noise. So of course you can necessarily say the opposite of effective communication is noise. Okay, and then we look through the main topics, and as we deal with this, we'll be looking at the components of the communication process, which deals with the sender, who initiates the message, that is the one who kickstarts, the one who triggers the communication process. Okay, as a sender, he initiates or she initiates, or they necessarily could initiate the message. It depends on the one or those who necessarily are engaged in such communication process. And then we have the message, that is the information being conveyed. We have the channel, which is the medium of communication. It could be in written form, it could be in spoken form, it could be through digital technology, or social media platforms, as the case may be. It could also be face-to-face, interaction or conversations. Then we have the receiver, who is the person receiving the message. It could be, of course, descriptively the audience, the listener or the hearers. And then we have feedback, which is response to the message. So, of course, in trying to describe this, it's termed response, and it can be termed response to the message. But of course, in essence, it's called feedback. So in your definition or description, you can say, okay, response to the message. That's why it fits. The word response will fit there, but it doesn't necessarily fit, as the right terminology. It can only fit into the explanation itself. Okay, so this will then take us further as we look at barriers to effective communication. Noise. I mentioned that if effective communication does not happen, then there's bound to be noise. And noise may not necessarily be, the production of unusual sounds or, disturbing sounds or sounds that distort the communication process alone. The distortion or necessarily the distractions, that may occur within communication, but the distortion in understanding or the inability for your message not to be understood by the listeners or your audience is as well descriptive to noise. It is tagged in essence as noise. And then we have language barriers, of course, differences in language and communication styles. This is very important to note. Now, there are places and their audience you will get to who may not always speak your language. In fact, you may be asked to maybe communicate or, let's say, write a content to a group of people who may not even understand your language. So at that point, it becomes a challenge, and of course, it becomes a burden. And becoming a burden in this sense entails that you are left with translation challenges or issues because you have to translate to the languages of that very audience or that very listener. And if you don't really know anything about their own language, you discover that there is more or less a communication breach, and it predisposes to language barrier because you do not speak the language I might understand, and I don't speak the language you might understand. So if we don't speak the language that each other may or might understand, it becomes a problem. So differences in language and even communication styles. Some people are actually quite good with persuasion in communication. Some are quite entertaining, even when they are actually quite formal, in their communication. Some may carry a mixture of formal and informal. Some may be very verbose, use high denotative words, meanings, to communicate. That is sophisticated words descriptively now to communicate. Some are actually used to doing that. Some may use very simple words. So it depends on the communication style, and the differences in the communication style can pose a challenge to within the communication process. And so we have next nonverbal cues, body language and gestures that may lead to misinterpretation. Of course, nonverbal cues basically deals with those expressions, or information you necessarily convey without the use of mouth. It just deals with body language or demonstration. Okay, sign language, gestures, and some people may misinterpret, particularly people who do not really understand, what these sign languages or gestures are necessarily is and mean. They may misinterpret it. So, and next we look at lack of feedback, which deals with the absence of response leading to misunderstandings. Of course, some reasons with the absence of response is that people or your audience may not understand what information you conveyed. There may be lack of understanding. They may as well be confused by the information you convey. They may as well be predisposed to different conditions. Your information may have grieved them. It may have affected them emotionally, psychologically, and otherwise. And so they may necessarily refuse to reply or give a feedback to whatever information they receive. So because people receive information and it affects them differently, information affects your audience differently based on predisposing circumstances. I talked about this in one of these lectures the other time, and I said, of course, cultural differences, personal predispositions or beliefs, um, personal experiences as well, or shared experiences, stories about certain things that concerns what you're talking about, which may, be projected to your listeners, as negative. Um, Religious predispositions and of course standing too can be another factor that may limit the feedback to your message or the information you're trying to convey. Because examples we have role-playing scenarios, of course, demonstrating effective communication. You can just look through that. I mean, there's some examples around you, of course, with people you may have engaged in communication with, and you necessarily can see that they are not quite fluent with the use of language, English language, particularly in the stream of business communication necessarily. In fact, maybe clients, partners, customers, and all of that. You find those cases if you're within the open market, and even within organizations, you meet people that are not too skillful with and in communication, and as well not proficient with the use of language, language particularly. And then we look at, of course, case studies illustrating the impact of communication barriers in various situations. There are such of those case studies, and of course, you can personalize these things by virtue of your experiences and your consistent practice. So take cues from there, and then learn how to sieve out that and those which are not and which is not. You see, so you can consistently build up on your capacity, for communicating better, into communicating better as well. And then, in conclusion, just a review and an overview is that effective communication is a two-way process that involves sending a message, receiving feedback, and adjusting messages based on feedback. Of course, whatever feedback or reply you receive, it is better that you look into those feedback. Those feedback will come in form of critiquing, recommendations, complaints, and what have you. It is better that you actually take those feedback because they become pointers or directions to the things you can do better with and through that information you necessarily want them to engage. It also helps you understand your audience better and your customers, most importantly, better, and also serve them better, by virtue of those feedback you receive. And those feedback could also be reviews. They could also be reviews on service delivery, sales on products, and then necessarily the engaging with skills or the introduction of certain products into the open market necessarily, or certain services that are not really common, may be quite alien to some new customers, or prospective customers, and you're expected to, of course, relate this to them. And the expectation is that you may not have them receiving this information quite friendly because it's alien and new to them. So it behoves on you, speaker, to be able to convince them and expect them to criticize, and as a matter of fact, utterly refuse to subscribe to whatever information you're trying to convey. So you just have to be patient with them and then ensure that you navigate skillfully and the strategies that are required, to engage them into your information, and then allowing them subscribe to your call to action. And so by understanding the components of the communication process and recognizing barriers to effective communication, individuals can enhance their communication skills for better interpersonal relationships. This is very important. Of course, the communication process helps you, subscribe to your audience. It gives you a place of, importance. It gives you an opportunity to be able to assess the heart and mind of your audience, your subscribers or your prospects, and then you know what next step to take to better satisfy them. So we have the next steps. Of course, I want you to please engage, and the next step includes me encouraging you as students, and of course you would have mentees too for you to encourage, and then engage students in activities, of course, which could be non-verbal communication skills such as body language and facial expressions. Engage in these things practically. It's an encouragement, and that's the essence for the next steps. And we have discussion questions and citations as it is. Please engage them, engage citations for further reading. Quiz as well.